Today I am going to show you how to install copper foil, so stick around. Hey everybody, it is Aaron at Warmoth, and as advertised, today I am going to show you how to install copper foil on your guitar body. I'm going to show you some of the tips that I've learned after having done this about a bajillion times. And I'm going to also go over a few things that are specific to the copper foil that Warmoth sells. The reason that you want to install copper foil on a guitar body in the first place is to help it reject all the things that are trying to get in there and make it hum, like fluorescent lights or radio interference or whatever. And basically you're going to use this metal foil to build a cage around the electronics. It's called a Faraday cage, which is always fun to say. And if you've ever seen the TV show Lost, which is like the TV show with the most promise and the worst payoff in the history of TV, the plot of that show is kind of built around a Faraday cage. Well, that's what we're going to build today, a Faraday cage. And basically, it's a metal cage that's grounded, and it can reject all those things that are trying to get at your electronics. And we're going to do that with a sheet of copper foil. And you can also do it with like aluminum foil. You could just put some kind of spray adhesive on the back of aluminum foil, or as they say across the pond, aluminium foil, and stick it in the cavity of your guitar and the pickup cavity and stuff. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not as robust and it's harder to solder on than copper foil. I would really recommend copper foil. Now, one thing you also need to know before you get started is that copper foil will cut you up real bad. So you got to be careful. If you've ever had a paper cut, well, copper foil is just like that, except for the paper is made out of metal. So if you're wrestling with this stuff for an hour and not paying attention to what you're doing, you'll pull your hands out of there and they will be cut to ribbons. So you have to pay attention to what you're doing and maybe use smoothing tools rather than just running it over with a thumb or something. So there's that. The other thing is you can make installing copper foil easier depending on what kind of cavities you have on your guitar. Today we're going to be using the Warmoth Body of Tonal Discovery. We're going to be installing the foil on the control cavity in the back and also this first pickup cavity here. If you, like say you have a Strat replacement body, if you order a swimming pool route, that's a breeze to install copper foil on. It's big and open and square. You can do that in no time flat. If you get the traditional single routing, that takes forever. There's so many nooks and crannies and angles, and you have to struggle with that, and it takes a long time. So obviously you don't want to spec your guitar out based on which one is easiest to put foil on, but it doesn't hurt to think about it in the beginning because it will make this job a lot easier. Now, as far as tools, you need a sheet of copper foil, a pair of scissors, razor blade, pencil with an eraser, and a soldering iron. So let's jump into it. The first thing you're going to do is line the bottom of the cavity. So we need a piece of foil that is the shape of the bottom of this cavity, and the easiest way to do that is to lay it right on the top of that cavity and just press with your finger like so and make a crease all around the shape of that cavity. And hopefully you can see that. Basically, you're doing the ultimate judo move of using the properties of this copper against itself. So there's the outer cavity. Now I'm going to see if I can get the inner dimension. That might be a little trickier, but let's give it a try. Here you can see is one of those areas where the screws go. There's another right there. There's one along this back edge right there. And I know there's one along this edge too, right there. All right, so you can kind of see now that we've left a crease in the shape of that cavity. So grab your scissors and start cutting. All right, so now we should have a piece that's pretty close. That looks pretty close. If it's not exact, it doesn't matter. Now, one thing I have found when you peel off this backing, you want to try and keep the copper from curling up as much as you can. And the best way to do that is, rather than peeling the copper from the backing, peel the backing from the copper. So lay the copper flat and see how I'm really more peeling the backing from the copper. And it'll still curl up a little bit. So you can see it's curled up a little bit on the end there, but it didn't curl up as much as it could have. All right, so now we're going to just stick that to the bottom of this cavity. And try not to commit to sticking it, actually like really adhering it until you know that you've got it in place, because once this stuff sticks, it sticks pretty good. So you want to make sure you've kind of got it centered, and you're going to get as much coverage as you can before you actually commit to it. And this looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and start sticking it down. And this is where that pencil will come in handy. Oops, I messed up there. Before I use my pencil, I'm going to grab a little screwdriver and see if I can correct that right there. Just using the screwdriver. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm using the screwdriver to sneak in there and kind of peel it back a little bit. See if I can. All right, that's better. Now, here's where the pencil comes in handy. You can use the eraser end and get right down there in the nooks and crannies along the edge. And make sure that it sticks right into those corners. All right, so there is the bottom. That looks pretty good. I like to kind of just see if I can work out as many bubbles as possible. Doesn't look like we have too many. I just like to make it look nice and neat. And this foil is actually pretty forgiving. It'll let you kind of run the bubbles out or kind of stick them so that it looks flat. All right, so there's that. Now we need to do the side cavities, and this is where having tape would make it easier, because you could just roll off a piece of tape and stick it in there. But again, since I don't have tape, I'm going to make a piece of tape. And I just happen to know from having done this lots of times that this straight edge I have right here is the perfect depth to create a piece of tape. So I'm just going to put this straight edge across the end of this and crease my paper right there. And there I have a nice width for my tape. So let me cut that out. And it doesn't have to be the exact height of the cavity. You need to air a little bigger so that you've got excess sticking out over the top, and that's fine. The main thing you need to do when you're doing this part is, once you've peeled off that adhesive on the back, you could have this big long piece of tape that's the length to get everything in one fell swoop, but that's going to make it very difficult because the key is to get the entire piece of foil down into the cavity and touching the bottom all at the same time before you start sticking on the sides. Because if you go like this and start sticking with a piece of it sticking out, then you're going to gradually end up with it sticking like that with a piece sticking out. So you've got to make sure the entire piece is down into the cavity and touching the bottom, and then start sticking in the center and work your way to the edges. And so I find that rather than try and do one long piece that's going to cover everything all at once and you're trying to manage this big long thing, it's easier just to break it up into small pieces. So let's start with this one. And again, best thing to do is hold the foil itself flat and peel the backing away rather than peeling the foil away, and this will help it not curl up so much. All right, so now we've got a piece of foil with a live sticky edge. We're gonna bend it like this and get the whole thing down in there. Let's do this way so you can see it a little better. We're gonna get the whole thing down in there, all touching the bottom at once, then commit to sticking it on the edge. And then we're gonna slowly work outwards from there. And this is where the foil can really cut you if you're not careful, because you've got this edge sticking up here. So just go slow, be conscious of what you're doing. All right, and then you can grab the pencil again, and you can use it to tamp down that corner right down there, and also use the side of the pencil to make sure it's sticking really well along the side of the cavity, like so. Once you're satisfied with that, then you grab your razor blade and you carefully just trim it along the top so it's the right height. And if you still have a little bit of extra sticking over the top, that's okay. You can just stick it along the top. But remember to always go that way. If you go that way, you're going to cut yourself. So always pull it this direction to stick it down over that edge. Sometimes I like to use my thumbnail to make sure it's all down flat. And then you're just going to continue this process until you've got the entire perimeter covered. Okay, so now there you have it. We have a nice complete coverage down in there, but we have an issue at the moment. We have two issues. One, we've got a lot of holes for wiring that need to come through and for our output jack. So I like to solve it by getting a little Allen wrench, and I know roughly where those wiring channels are going to be. There's one right there. So again, you can just push it until you can see where it is, and then you just use an Allen wrench, poke a little hole right there. Just like that, and now you've got a place for those wires to come through. And then similarly, where the input jack is, right there. So just use your finger to press where that input jack ream is. An Allen wrench is going to be too small for that, obviously, so I just use the razor blade. All right, there are still just a couple more things we're gonna need. One is the cover. I've already taken the time to put the foil on the back of the cover. That's probably the most easy part. But you can see that on this surface where the cover rests, there isn't an obvious contact to complete the grounding circuit and make this cage complete. So the best thing to do is take a little piece of foil. Let me cut one out right now. And run that up to one of these areas where the screws for the plate are. This one seems like a prime candidate. Nah, let's do this one, just because. So run it right there. So now we have a piece of foil that will come up and make contact with the back of the plate once the plate is in position. And by doing it where the mounting screws are, you know that it's going to be held down there very tight to make a good connection. And if you're worried about it, you could do another one over here. In fact, why don't we, since we're just in the mode. All right, so now we've got one on each end. Now, important aspect of the copper foil that Warmoth sells is that it does not have a conductive adhesive. So we have several pieces in here that need to be connected to each other. They're already kind of touching, but we want to make sure that they have a continuity between them. So we're going to take a little drop of solder and just solder everywhere they touch. Not everywhere they touch, but just where the seam comes together, we're going to put a drop of solder right there so we know that they have continuity. So let's do that really quick. We have 5 pieces of foil in here. We've got one on the bottom, 2 that make up the sides, no, actually 3 that make up the sides because we put a little one by the output jack, and then the 2 pieces on the end. So we need to make sure that those are all connected, and to do that, all we do is put a little drop of solder where they touch, like so. Now I should also mention that the principle of running up a little piece of foil here so that you make contact with the foil that's on the back of the cover would be the same as if I were doing a top-routed guitar that had a pick guard. I would put foil on the back of the pick guard, put it in the cavity here, and I would want to run a little piece of foil up so that when the pick guard were screwed on, it made contact. Now I will tell you, if you're using adhesive foil that does not have conductive adhesive and you need to solder the seams so that there's a connection there, it's easy enough to do on a cavity, but on a pick guard, that's a no-go. You will melt your pick guard. So when you do that, you need to use a sheet that will cover the whole pick guard in one sheet. And doing pick guards is super easy. It's just like doing cavity covers. You just lay this sheet across and use a razor blade to cut it off. So getting the entire pick guard with one sheet is very easy, but I just want to make sure you know that, because if you use tape strips on the back of your pick guard and think that you can solder them like I've just done, you will melt your pick guard. So be aware of that. And now that the back cavity is done, we're gonna do the bridge pickup cavity. And this will be a good one to demonstrate on because it is a weird shape because this is the Warmoth body of tonal discovery. We've routed it for a bunch of different pickup configurations here. So we have an odd shape, and I'm just going to do the entire thing. One thing I will say about this process is it's never perfect. There are always going to be some gaps in your Faraday cage, whether it's to let a wire come through or whatever. You want to make it as complete as you can, but there's always going to be some weakness. Well, one thing that's very difficult to do with certain pickup routes is get way down there in the wells that are left for the pickup feet or for the mounting screws. Humbuckers particularly have these really deep wells right here. And what I usually do is just pretend that they aren't there. I make the floor go all the way across to the very edge. And so you end up with the foil covering that well. And then if there are mounting screws that need to go down in there, I just poke 2 little holes on the well and drop them down, or 2 little holes in the foil and then drop them down in place. I'm not sure if this scrap will be big enough. Oh, it will. All right, well, I'm just going to use this scrap then. Got to use the whole buffalo whenever you can. Waste not, want not. Whatever slogan works for you. And we're going to repeat the same process as we did for the cavity below. We're just going to lay it across and then use the finger to trace the perimeter. And I usually can do this pretty intuitively, but this is such a weird shape. Now, if this were top mounted and you were going to be putting a pick guard on the top, you would want to, again, just take a little piece of foil and lay it out on the top so that when the pick guard laid down on it, it would make contact. So you can see, looking down into this cavity, and that's a pretty neat job. You can see a little drop of solder right there and another one in that corner so that both of those strips are connected with the floor of the cavity. Looks pretty clean. Same on the back. As we go around it, you can see a couple drops of that solder here and there to keep everything connected. And then of course we've got the strips up here to make contact with the foil on the cover when we put it on. And there you have it. That is how to properly shield your guitar. And as you can see, I've got the Warmoth body of Tonal Discovery back in peak operating condition, ready for whatever the next experiment might be. And now it is fully shielded in the control cavity and the bridge pickup cavity. If you have any more questions about how to properly shield your guitar or about Warmoth's copper foil sheets or copper foil tape, make sure and visit the Warmoth website or give our customer service reps a call. And until next time, keep on picking.